Much has been said about Britain over the past years. Like all countries around the world, the early 2010s were a time of turmoil.
What is your instant reaction to that?
Very upsetting.
The infamous 2008 financial crash sent shockwaves throughout the developed world, climaxing somewhere in the undeveloped world.
The effects were worst felt by the American Spirit, Iceland, and certain UK branches of Santander.
Britain was in serious trouble for a number of months. But then, our hero, Gordon Brown, emerged from the shadow cabinet. With his checkbook in hand, he secured the country's economic future. Britain had smashed it.
Gordon, now known as simply GB, had saved us from certain ruin, and continued to strengthen the footsie and ties between the United Kingdom and Europe.
If you're unemployed, you've got to go back to work.
All was well until he berated a bigoted woman, which wouldn't usually have been a problem, but GB had been placed on a pedestal so high that few before him could reach. This blunder was to be his undoing.
A plan was hatched amongst his allies, colleagues, friends and acquaintances to oust him of his leadership, and then, on May the 11th, 2010, GB was painfully executed and immolated.
I blame myself for what is done, but you've got to remember that this was me being helpful.
Stabbed in the back by his peers on the Parliament floor, whilst orating about an upcoming piece of legislation to safeguard the country against a dramatic rise in knife crime. The last prophet of sensibility was dead. It is said his last words still reverberate around the towers of Westminster.
Et tu, Brute?
Et tu, Brute?
Thus began the strong and stable years of Tory leadership, helmed at first by David Cameron, a prior apprentice to Gordon, who had turned to the dark side in the days leading up to Gordon's political assassination. In an attempt to crush the rebels in his own party, DC called a referendum, the likes of which no one on the British Isles had ever seen.
The government is hurtling towards a chaotic breakfast that will damage our economy.
To David, the DC universe extended far beyond the seemingly insignificant referendum vote. But little did he know that one binary yes or no question would put the DCEU to bed once and for all.
Mark my words, we will make Brexit a success.
In one firm, decisive voice, the British people unanimously decided one Thursday morning that enough was enough. 23rd of June 2016, 1/3 of one half of the eligible voting populace voted to consider one day potentially the idea of perhaps thinking about maybe telling their European neighbours and one-time compatriots to well and truly fuck off.
You do know better than that, and you can do better than that, and you'd better try.
Time to divorce Europe. And as with any divorce, it was hardest on the children. A lot of kids didn't make it past the next few years. Women started selling their children for a packet of Monch 2 and baby sweet corn from the underground intercontinental black market. This was Britain at its darkest.
The vote tomorrow is whether you want to break and sever every link.
Forget what you think you know about Brexit. This documentary aims to explain once and for all the rationale and symbolic consensus that led to the event now known as breakfast.
Brexit means breakfast.
29th of March 2019. It was on this fateful day that the country changed forever. Britain had left the European Union, and the EU weren't happy about it.
The richest strata were hardest hit. Luxury items became nigh on impossible to source. car manufacturer Jaguar decided to cease trading in the United Kingdom. Food and drinks retailer Marks and Spencer's went bust.
The poorest in society were hit third hardest, after the middle classes. After a short stint in prison, the Greg from Greggs was the first celebrity suicide, after all branches of the hit pastry chain closed for good. J.D. Weatherspoon followed in suit, in both closures and suicide.
The biggest shock to this sphere of society came when Deal or No Deal was forced to cut live on air when celebrity philanthropist Noel Edmonds hung himself with the phone wire, following on from a heated debate with the banker. The producers of the show later revealed that there never was a banker, and Noel had developed acute schizophrenia, doctors say caused in part by being abused by a banker as a child. Celebrity and pseudo-celebrity deaths aside, Britain was in a pretty sorry state.
Bye-bye!
To rub yet more salt into already salty wounds, the British demanded their star back from the European flag. This caused mass panic across the continent as the remaining stars no longer formed a circle, leaving a sort of C shape. The British later claimed the blue background of the flag was the intellectual property of the United Kingdom. Although the claim was false, the EU submissively changed the colour of the flag to a mild green. This minor victory was a much-needed boost to the country as a whole, but it was short-lived.
Over the coming weeks, tensions grew throughout Europe, especially Germany and Poland, who really rather liked the original flag. They demanded Brussels changed it back. Brussels refused. As penance for this, Germany paused exports of German beer to the UK, as did Poland, causing the late 2019 beer riots, in which unfortunately several police horses lost their shoes, and 15,206 people died.
The stranglehold continued. Britain, having barely survived the riots, came unto new strain as France launched a trade embargo against their old enemy, Britain. Much to the disdain of the French, Britain had demanded their chairs back, which they had lent to France in the time of their membership of the EU, with an end game plan of subsequently renting those same chairs back to the same French for a fee.
Over an 8-day period, the French periodically punished the British with what they knew would hit them the hardest. The British people could handle it when the flow of champagne was stopped. Some parts of the country were reeling after the Prosecco was ceased, but the country as a whole pushed through. The community had banded together and resolved to get through this latest offence. Protests began when the embargo included dry white wine. This turned to riots when white was followed by rosé, and no one was prepared for when regular white wine was off the menu. And then finally, painfully, martial law was called when the red wine was no longer supplied to British off-licences. Now, there was only cider.
The British government desperately needed new friends, and everyone knows the best way to make friends is through trade deals. However, all the government had to offer in these trade deals were 18,000 metric tons of flour. Ironically, after the departure from the European Union, the imperial system was once and for all discarded, and its use punishable by a very short prison sentence. This threw the catering industry, the Union for Weights and Measures, and the plumbers into disarray, as no one knew the weight of anything anymore. This became a large-scale issue when the UK attempted to give away the 18,000 metric tons of flour as a peace offering to Cornwall, in an attempt to postpone their allegiance with Wales.
As we all know, negotiations between Cornwall and the UK failed when Cornwallians discovered that the pile of flour was closer to 14,000 metric tons due to an issue with the UK government's confusing set of scales. This offence was the driving force between Cornwall's push for independence and subsequent redependence on Wales. The new superpower on the British Isles, now known as Menyn Flapiau, was a force to be reckoned with in the areas of coal mining, ice cream vending, general touristry and bakery. It wasn't long until Menyn Flapiau erected borders to separate themselves from the ever-increasing, decaying, disunited kingdom.
Scotland, of course, kept true to their 2014 referendum result and stuck with the UK through thick and thin. Even when the Northern Irish rose up and attempted their potato coup, Scotland was the first to tell them to simmer down. Britain was on the brink of collapse. They knew they needed to think outside of the box to be able to thrive once more as an island nation, now outwardly bombarded and internally fractured.
The terms of one trade deal in particular, with their future close ally Uzbekistan, left the people of Britain with a sour taste of sulphur in their mouths, as the deal was for sulphur. Part of the deal was selling council houses and bulk deals on cider. No one foresaw the rush of migrating Uzbekis into Britain, and within 2 short months, the Uzbekis outnumbered the racists 3-1.
You can't say anything about the immigrants because you're saying that you're
Be quiet.
Racists, confused with how their vote to leave had ended with so many brown faces, found a new banner to fall behind when the UKIP party resurfaced and were voted into power in the snap election of 2020.
An economic minefield where problems could implode at any time.
The newly appointed super team of Al Murray and Andy Murray led the party to a sweeping majority in the Commons, completely smashing the Wayne Rooney-led Liberal Democrat Party. The UKIP party manifesto that the UK needed to leave more. And so it was for a stable few months. Al made all the jokes and Andy played the tennis. No other political party could match their partnership and pure prowess in the chambers of Westminster.
We look back now fondly of those wistful times before everything. Before the war, before the vote, before the mandatory enemas. The golden wonder years. We look back and we remember Gordon Brown, our Jesus Christ. Thank the Lord we listened to your economic decisions. All the money we have spent on statues of your face was not misplaced, and is the only thing keeping us going now. Praise be you, Gordon. Blessed be my children. Please don't let the radiation affect them too much.
They do not know what they are doing. They are leading us into a trap.